so imagine a country so repressive. They call it like the North Korea of Africa.
Yeah.
And people are leaving so fast that it's known as the world's fastest emptying nation. We're talking about Eritrea. And in this deep dive, we're looking at why organizations are demanding sanctions against its government.
Yeah, it's a really interesting case. We've got this submission from REDRESS and Eritrea Focus. They're both human rights organizations. And they sent this to the UK government.
Okay.
They're asking for Magnitsky sanctions.
Magnitsky sanctions.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that are specifically designed to target individuals and entities.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so when we say target, we're talking about human rights abuses.
Right.
Like, that's the core of it.
Yeah, so the idea is to make it so costly to do these human rights abuses that it deters them from doing it again in the future.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's sort of like it holds them accountable.
Exactly, yeah.
Punishing them, hopefully stopping it from happening again.
Yeah.
So this submission, though, it's not just like, hey, do something. It's very specific.
Yeah, very specific.
Okay.
Why sanctions are warranted in Eritrea's case.
Okay, so paint me a picture. What's actually happening in Eritrea? Why are we at this point?
It's a dire situation. It's really bad.
Okay.
They describe Eritrea as like this, hot, dusty prison camp, like a human rights house of horrors.
Right. Strong words.
Yeah, very strong. And, this isn't just kind of like dramatic, language.
Right.
The UN Special Rapporteur on Eritrea has documented just widespread systematic human rights abuse.
Okay, systematic, so that's the government.
Yes.
The Eritrean government. Okay, so when we say human rights abuses, what are we talking about here?
It's a whole gamut. We've got mass murder, sexual violence, enforced disappearances, forced labor, torture.
Torture.
Yeah. And, it's worth pointing out that Eritrea sits near the bottom of the Corruption Perceptions Index.
Okay.
So there's just a severe lack of transparency and accountability.
So you've got a government that's not transparent. They're not held accountable.
Right.
It sounds like there's not a lot of recourse for the people.
Exactly.
If they're experiencing these things.
Right.
Yeah.
This lack of accountability just creates this environment where abuse can thrive.
Wow. Okay. So we've got the systematic human rights abuses from the government, but then we also have this culture it sounds like, of not being open and not being held accountable.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So now what about the prisons?
Oh, the prisons are really bad. The conditions are just horrific.
Yeah.
They describe the use of underground shipping containers as torture chambers.
What?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Wow.
People are detained, incommunicado.
Incommunicados, so they have no contact.
No contact with the outside world, yeah.
So their families, their friends, no one knows where they are.
Right. And they don't even know where their loved ones are. It's sad. And for decades. Decades, yeah.
Wow, that's hard to even fathom.
Yeah.
And you mentioned forced labor earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Is that tied into the prison system?
Yeah, it's connected in a way, but it goes beyond the prisons. Eritrea has this forced conscription and national service.
Yeah.
It's notorious for its indefinite duration and really abusive conditions. People are forced to work in all sorts of sectors, and they're not getting paid, or very little, and they don't know when it's going to end.
Oh, wow.
It's really one of the main reasons why so many Eritreans are risking their lives to flee the country.
So you're saying this forced conscription, this national service, there's no end in sight?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's awful. Then you've got this other layer, and that's the Tigray region of Ethiopia.
Right, yeah.
Which adds yet another layer of complexity to all of this.
Absolutely. Eritrea's involvement in the Tigray conflict has been devastating.
Okay.
The source material talks about Eritrean forces participating in just awful atrocities, massacres, widespread rape, and sexual violence.
Wow.
And there are reports that over 100,000 women in Tigray have experienced conflict-related sexual violence.
Those numbers are just staggering. It's just horrific. And what's even more chilling is that even if people manage to escape Eritrea, they're still not safe.
Right.
This report mentions something about the Eritrean government. Their reach, it extends beyond its borders.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. They use diplomatic missions and agents abroad to harass, intimidate, and even extort money from Eritrean refugees, and diaspora communities.
Wow.
So they essentially continue the persecution even after people have fled.
So it's like they never escape it,
Exactly.
like the long arm of the state.
Yeah, and it's particularly concerning in places like the UK,
Oh, okay.
which Amnesty International has said is one of the countries where Eritrean human rights defenders are most at risk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a big problem.
Okay, so that underscores why countries like the UK need to do something
Yes.
to step up and provide protection.
Yes.
But how do these Magnitsky sanctions fit into all of this? What are Redress and Eritrea Focus hoping to achieve by pushing for these sanctions? What's their goal here?
So they have several objectives.
Okay.
First, they want to break this cycle of impunity
Okay.
that has allowed these abuses to continue.
Right.
So they believe that by targeting these specific individuals and entities that are responsible, they can send a message
Yep.
that these actions are not going to be tolerated.
So it's not just about the past actions, it's about stopping future ones as well.
Right. They also argue that sanctions can actually disrupt the money that's supporting this repressive apparatus.
Right, because if you're freezing assets and all this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it weakens their ability to carry out these abuses.
So they've identified, I guess, specific people and entities
Yes, exactly.
that are involved in this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they've provided evidence
Okay.
of their involvement in all these different terrible things.
Okay, so they're not just like, oh, we think this person's doing this. They've got the receipts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
They've done their homework.
Okay. And it's not just individuals, right?
No, they're also targeting state-owned entities.
Ah, yeah.
So companies that are involved in mining or construction or other industries that are probably benefiting from forced labor.
So by targeting these companies, you're aiming to disrupt the financial flows that support this whole repressive apparatus.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I'm curious, do they just present like cold, hard facts? Is there any like human element to this submission?
Yeah. Actually, they include something pretty powerful.
Okay.
Quotes from individuals who are directly affected by the Eritrean regime.
Yeah.
These voices, they really drive home, like the human cost.
Oh, for sure. Because it's one thing to hear, the legal stuff
Yeah.
and all the background, but to hear it from the people who are actually experiencing these horrors,
Right.
that's got to be powerful.
Yeah, and one quote that really struck me
Okay.
was from Habte Hagos.
Okay.
He's the chairperson of Eritrea Focus.
Okay.
And he talks about compiling this dossier,
Okay.
the emotional toll, like just reliving
Right.
all these atrocities.
Yeah. And then he urges us to think about, quote, those tens of thousands of Eritrean citizens who have suffered for decades.
Yeah, wow. That's heavy.
Yeah.
It's not just asking for action, it's asking us to connect with the human element here,
Right.
the people behind the statistics.
Right.
Imagine the weight
Yeah.
that these people have carried, not just in Eritrea, but in the conflicts across the region.
Right.
Because that's all been fueled by the Eritrean government. And it's not just past suffering either.
Right.
It's this ongoing risk of further conflict.
Yeah.
And he urges the UK government to act now. He says they have, quote, a moral obligation to impose sanctions.
Yeah. Powerful stuff.
That's a strong statement. It shifts the focus from like a legal debate
Yeah.
to a moral one. It's
Right.
no longer just like, oh, are sanctions effective?
Mm.
It's, are we as an international community
Yeah.
willing to stand by and allow these atrocities to continue?
Yeah.
So that moral dimension is echoed by Natalia Kubek.
She's a legal officer at Redress.
Right.
And she argues that Eritrea's history shows how, quote, a culture of impunity encourages the perpetration of serious human rights violations.
It's true.
So basically, by not doing anything,
Yeah.
we're creating an environment where this will happen again.
Right. You're letting them get away with it.
Exactly. And she goes on to say that imposing these sanctions would send a clear message that the UK is serious
Yes.
about seeking accountability and stopping this from happening again,
Exactly.
breaking that cycle.
Exactly. Breaking the cycle of impunity.
Okay, I'm starting to get the bigger picture here. So it's not just about punishing people for what they've done. It's about preventing future suffering.
Right.
And it's about sending that message
Yes.
to the world
Yeah.
that this is not okay.
Yeah.
And these Magnitsky sanctions, which are so focused on individual accountability,
Uh-huh.
those are seen as an effective tool for achieving this goal.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's always, I guess, counter-arguments
Right.
and concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Some people argue that sanctions hurt the people they're supposed to help.
Yeah.
How do we know that these sanctions won't make life harder for Eritreans who are already going through so much?
Right. It's a legitimate concern. But these sanctions are designed to be really targeted, like we were saying,
Okay.
focusing on those assets and travel of the specific people that are responsible.
Okay.
It's not like a broad economic sanction.
Right. It's not like we're not sanctioning the entire country.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So the idea is to put the pressure on the leadership
Okay.
and those who are complicit
Right.
without impacting ordinary Eritreans.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. And in the long run, by promoting accountability and deterring future abuses, these sanctions could help create a more stable, prosperous Eritrea. The goal is to change the behavior of those in power.
Right. It's not to punish the country.
Right.
It's to change the behavior of the leadership.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But sanctions aren't like a magic solution, right?
No, they're just one tool. In a broader toolkit, you need diplomatic pressure, support for human rights defenders, and efforts to promote accountability through international justice.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
Yes.
But one thing's for sure, we got to do something.
Yes, absolutely.
It's urgent.
Yeah.
This submission from Redress and Eritrea Focus, it's a reminder that we can't just ignore this. And that's where the Magnitsky sanctions come in.
Yeah.
It's something concrete that the UK government can do.
Yeah, they're a targeted way for them to take a stand and say, we will not tolerate these abuses.
So this decision
Yeah.
to implement these sanctions or not, it has some serious weight to it.
Yeah.
Moral and political weight. It'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see what the UK government does.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how they respond.
Me too. So let's get into, I guess, the specifics of what Redress and Eritrea Focus are asking for.
Okay.
What does this actually look like, this call for sanctions?
So they've actually done a lot of the legwork for the UK government. They've identified specific individuals and entities they believe should be targeted,
Okay.
and they've provided detailed evidence.
So they've given them everything they need, basically.
Yeah, it's a roadmap
Okay.
for action.
Okay. So let's talk about some of these individuals
Okay.
and entities.
Okay.
Who are they and what makes them worthy of these sanctions?
They've named people across different branches of the Eritrean state.
Okay.
Military, intelligence services, government ministries. These people are implicated in the abuses we've been discussing.
Okay.
They've provided evidence to back up their claims.
So they're not just making accusations.
No, they're not.
They're building a case here.
Exactly.
And they've given the UK government what they need to take action.
Yeah, they've laid it all out.
Okay, and we're talking about entities too, right?
Yeah, key state-owned entities that they think are complicit, like companies involved in mining, construction, sectors that are probably using forced labor.
So the idea is by going after these entities,
Yeah.
you're really trying to cut off the money
Right.
that's funding these awful things.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense.
It's a big decision, for sure. And one of the things that really stood out to me in the submission is how they connect these sanctions to accountability,
Okay.
like failing to act. It sends this message,
Right.
not just to Eritrea, but to other regimes that might be thinking about doing similar things.
So it sets a precedent.
Exactly.
So this is the line.
Yeah.
You can't cross it.
Yeah. And if you do, there are consequences. They're basically saying that if we don't do anything, it encourages these perpetrators.
Yeah.
And it undermines, the whole system of international human rights law.
Right. So it weakens it in a sense.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about impact.
Hmm.
If the UK actually does this,
Yeah.
what could it realistically achieve?
Well, we got to be realistic here.
Right.
Sanctions are not a magic solution.
Yeah.
And they're not going to change Eritrea overnight.
Right.
But they can have a pretty big impact. First of all, they directly target the people responsible.
Okay.
Freezing their assets, restricting travel, it makes it much harder for them to operate and enjoy, their ill-gotten gains.
So you're hitting them where it hurts.
Yeah. Make
Yeah.
them feel the consequences.
Right. You're not letting them profit.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And beyond that, sanctions send a message to the Eritrean government.
Okay.
The world is watching.
Right.
You're not getting away with this.
You can't hide.
Yeah, exactly. And that might give us some leverage
Okay.
to pressure them,
Diplomatically.
Yeah, diplomatically, to push them towards reforms, maybe get them to respect human rights a little better.
So it's not just about punishment. It's about finding a path to a better future for Eritrea.
Exactly.
Right.
And sanctions, they can be really effective at incentivizing change, especially when you combine them with diplomacy and support for civil society groups.
So a multifaceted approach.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, so let's talk about the listener for a sec.
Okay.
Why should they care
Right.
about what's happening in Eritrea?
That's a great question.
I mean, it's all the way over there.
Yeah.
What does it have to do with their life?
I think there are a few reasons why this matters to all of us.
Okay.
First of all, it's about empathy.
Okay.
You know, we're talking about human beings suffering terrible things. Their stories should be heard.
Yeah.
And their calls for justice shouldn't be ignored.
I mean, you're right. It's easy to get lost in the legal stuff,
Yeah.
the geopolitics, but at the end of the day, this is about people
Yes.
suffering.
Yes. And we can't ignore that.
Right. We have to care.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's one reason.
Yeah. And there's another reason.
Okay.
It's practical, actually.
Okay.
You see, Eritrea's instability, the human rights abuses, they have consequences. Consequences that reach far beyond their borders.
What do you mean?
I mean, it contributes to mass displacement,
Okay.
regional conflicts,
Okay.
even transnational crime.
So what happens there doesn't just stay there.
Exactly. It has ripple effects.
Okay.
And that's why international action is so important,
Okay.
especially from countries like the UK,
Okay.
who have influence in the region.
So this deep dive, it's not just about understanding some far-off problem.
Right.
It's about understanding that we're all connected
Exactly.
and that we can do something.
Yeah. It brings us back to that question from the beginning.
Okay.
What responsibility do other countries have?
Right. What responsibility do we have? It's a tough question. But by learning about Eritrea, by considering the impact of these Magnitsky sanctions, we can start forming our own opinions.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
about being informed.
It's not just about listening passively.
Right.
It's about engaging with the information,
Okay.
challenging your own assumptions,
Right.
and figuring out where you stand on this.
So we're encouraging our listeners to keep learning,
Yes.
to dig deeper,
Yeah.
get different perspectives,
Yeah.
and decide for themselves what role they want to play.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Eritrea, it's about humanity
It's about our responsibility to uphold human rights.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll leave you with this.
Okay.
If we do nothing, what does that say about us?
Yeah.
And what are the consequences of our inaction?
It's something to think about.
Yeah, food for thought. It really does make you think. You know, you see these human rights abuses.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to feel overwhelmed.
Right.
Like, what can I even do?
Yeah.
But this deep dive has shown that, I mean, there are things that can be done.
Yeah.
Like these Magnitsky sanctions. And even, you know, our voices can contribute to a bigger movement.
Absolutely. And this submission, it's not just a legal document. It's a call to action,
Yeah.
a plea for solidarity.
Right. And a reminder that we all have a role to play.
Exactly.
So what can our listener do? What can they do knowing what they know now about Eritrea? How can they turn that into action?
Well, first, staying informed. Okay.
Spreading awareness,
Yeah.
like sharing this deep dive
Right?
with friends, family, social media.
So you're starting conversations. You're making sure that this doesn't just disappear.
Exactly.
Okay. So staying informed, talking about it. What else?
Well, they're organizations.
Okay.
Like Redress and Eritrea Focus, they're actively working on this.
Right.
So you can support them.
Donate, volunteer, or just even stay updated on what they're doing.
Right, yeah. Find those organizations that you really connect with
Okay.
and figure out how you want to help.
Okay, so you can support them.
Yeah.
What about like our elected officials?
Oh, yeah. Don't underestimate the power of contacting them.
Okay.
Letting them know that you care about this, urging them to take action, it can make a difference.
Because it's easy to feel like our voices don't matter.
Right.
But when enough people speak up,
Yeah,
policymakers have to listen.
they do. And, you know, this isn't just about Eritrea.
Okay.
It's about standing up for human rights.
Everywhere. Everywhere. These principles, they apply all over the world. The lessons we learn from this case,
Right.
they can be applied elsewhere too.
So this deep dive, it wasn't just about, you know, learning some facts. It was about empowering the listener to become informed, to engage with it,
Yeah, to be an active citizen.
to contribute to a better world.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We've explored the situation. We've talked about sanctions.
Right.
And, you know, hopefully we've encouraged our listener to take what they've learned and do something.
Because ultimately, fighting for human rights,
Yeah,
it takes all of us.
it does. Well said. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's been informative And we hope it's been inspiring.
Yes.
And remember, keep learning, keep engaging, keep fighting for what's right.